Welcome to this week's Torah lesson. This week's Torah portion is Parsha Tazria and Parsha Metzora. The question of the week is, how do we experience Geulah, redemption? So this week's Torah portion, Parsha Tazria, begins with Isha ki Tazria, a woman giving birth, renewal. Nevertheless, the whole Torah portion speaks about leprosy. So the beginning is about birth and renewal, and the whole Torah portion is about leprosy. Next week, the second Torah portion, Parsha Metzora, speaks about leprosy, Metzora leprosy. But if you read the whole Torah portion, it speaks about purification. It should have been the opposite. In the first Torah portion, Tazria, where it speaks about renewal, it should have spoken about the purification. And where it speaks about Metzora, it should talk about the actual leprosy. And here you see it's totally all intertwined and interconnected. And the question is, why so? Next question Rabbi asks is, we know Metzora, which means leprosy, is one of the names of Mashiach, the Redeemer. Why is the Redeemer called a leper? So Rabbi explains like this, that the truth is that nega, which is the name of leprosy, is referring to on a spiritual level a very, very high spiritual state. A very powerful spiritual state. And Rabbi explains, as you see clearly, because what does the Torah say? That a person will have a nega ba'ur psarei. Where does the nega, where does the leprosy take place? In the skin. If it's a leprosy, how come it doesn't affect the organs and the limbs of the person? Only the skin. Because you see, you're dealing with a very, very high spiritual state, and actually nega comes from the word of nogeh, it only touches the person. It's almost like a reminder. It touches the skin, the external part, because really, nega is not bad. Really, it's very, very good, it's very, very powerful. On the skin, on the most external part of the person, it touches the person. What is the purification process of this nega, of this very high spiritual state that's touching the person on the skin? So what does the Torah say? The Torah says clearly, Zois tiyeh Torah HaMetzora, this should be the Torah of the Metzora, b'yoyim tarasa, in the day that he's purified. So Rabbi asks, 1 second. It's talking about the purification, so it should have said, Zois tiyeh Taras HaMetzora. This is the purification of Metzora. But what does it say? No, this is the Torah of the Metzora. And then it says, b'yoyim tarasa, on the day of the purification. What's the idea by day? Why can't it be done by night? Why specifically by day? So Rabbi explains, because what the Torah is telling us, a powerful insight into the whole idea of Negoyim. Yes, it's a very, very high spiritual state. And Torah Metzora means that Hashem is telling us, if you want to have real purification, you need to learn Torah. And not only have to learn Torah by Yoim, by day, because day resembles the idea of light. And when you take the light of Torah and you put it into the Negoyim, into the challenges and the plagues that you have, you take something which is a nega, which is a leprosy, which is a plague, you transform it with the light of Torah into the same letters of nega, nun, gimel, ayin, and you switch it around, you have oineg, you have real pleasure. And to take it a step further, the Rebbe says, the word ha-metzora is numerically 411, which is the same numerical value as Olam HaToyu, which you know Olam HaToyu is that very, very powerful world, which is too powerful for us to contain. So Ha-Metzora is referring to a very, very powerful spiritual light, and when you learn Torah with the light of Torah, you're able to transform the Ha-Metzora, the Toyu, from nega into the idea of Oineg. So based on this, Rebbe explains very clearly why in each Torah portion, the first Torah portion of Tazria, where it starts off with childbirth, renewal, it speaks about leprosy. Why? Because it's not a contradiction. They're both about renewal. We just need the proper glasses. And the same thing with the Torah portion of Metzora, where it speaks about purification, the name is leprosy. Why? Because we're not afraid. They're both connected. It's about bringing light into both of them. And based on this, the Rebbe explains why Mashiach is called a Metzora. Because Metzora is a very, very high level state. Like we said, Metzora is the same numerical value as the Olam HaToyu, the world we call chaos. We call it chaos because it's too much light. But actually, the Olam HaToyu is a very, very high level. So based on this, the Rebbe explains very simple. We know that we're living, unfortunately, in Geulah. What does Geulah mean? Geulah means that it's an exile. God's not revealed. The Hebrew word for Geulah is Geulah. We're in Geulah. We're in exile. What is the word for redemption? Geulah. What's the difference between redemption and exile? One letter. What's the letter? Aleph. In other words, when you take Aleph and you put it into Geulah, when you take Hashem and put it into exile, you have redemption. You don't have to create anything new. You just got to bring Hashem into your life. And then you'll experience the greatest powerful blessings. So to answer the question, how can we experience Geulah? How can we experience redemption and all the powerful blessings? Geulah, redemption, is all about revealing God, the Aleph in Gullus, in exile. So it's easy. Bring Hashem with you in Gullus, and you'll have true redemption and true happiness. Thanks so much for joining us for our weekly Torah lesson. This week's Torah lesson is dedicated to the memory of Baruch ben Aryeh Leib, Shlomo ben Yosef, and Rachel Bas Lipa. May their souls be elevated by the Torah we're studying in their memory. Have a great and blessed week. For more information, please see our website, chabad.swf.org.